By the time Ryan got me through my apartment door, I was sweating harder than I had during physical therapy at the hospital. "Don't say it," I warned as I lowered myself carefully onto the couch, one hand gripping the armrest while my ribs protested every breath. Ryan set my discharge bag on the coffee table. "I wasn't going to say anything. You were going to say I should have let you bring the wheelchair upstairs. I was going to say you look incredibly graceful." I glared at him. He smiled and disappeared toward the kitchen like he already lived there. 3 days earlier, another driver had run a red light and turned my car into something the tow yard photographs made look impossible to survive. I'd escaped with cracked ribs, a badly sprained knee, stitches along my forehead, and strict instructions not to pretend I was fine. Pretending I was fine happened to be one of my better skills. Ryan returned with water and 2 pills. "Pain medication," he said. "You're due." I stared at his palm. "How do you know?" "Because the nurse explained the schedule twice. She explained it to me, and I listened. That should have been normal." Ryan had been my best friend for almost 11 years. He knew how I took my coffee, which takeout place I hated despite ordering from it constantly, and exactly how long to leave me alone when I was angry. Still, something about him standing in my apartment with my medication already memorized made my chest feel strange in a way I blamed entirely on the cracked ribs. Then I noticed the duffel bag beside the entryway, and another bag behind it. "What's that?" Ryan followed my stare. "My stuff." "Why is your stuff here?" "Because I'm staying." I actually laughed. It hurt enough that I immediately regretted it. "You're not moving in because I bruised myself. You fractured 2 ribs, your knee can barely support you, and you're not supposed to drive. I can order food. You nearly fell getting from the elevator to your couch." "I did not nearly fall. You grabbed my jacket hard enough to choke me. That was balance. That was attempted murder." I reached for the water just to avoid smiling. Ryan's expression softened. "Ethan, it's temporary, until you can manage safely. You have your own apartment. I'm aware. You have work. Also aware. You have a life." For the first time, he hesitated. Only for a second. Then he picked up his duffel and headed toward my spare room. "So do you," he said quietly. "And right now, I'm staying in it." I watched him disappear down the hallway, suddenly aware that he hadn't asked whether staying would inconvenience me. More unsettlingly, I realized I wasn't sure I wanted him to. Ryan established rules before I had been home 24 hours. The first was that I wasn't allowed to carry anything while using the crutches. The second was that I had to take my medication on schedule instead of waiting until the pain became unbearable. The third was apparently that asking for help did not constitute a personal failure, although I refused to recognize that one as legitimate. By the 3rd morning, I was standing in the kitchen trying to make coffee when Ryan walked in and stopped. "What?" He looked at the crutch wedged under my arm, the mug in one hand, and the coffee pot in the other. "Nothing," he said. "I'm just deciding whether watching you attempt this counts as assisting in your suicide. I'm making coffee. You're performing a circus act." He took the pot from me. "I had it." "I know." That irritated me more than if he'd argued. Ryan never treated me like I was helpless. If I could do something safely, he let me do it, even when it took 3 times longer than usual. He only stepped in when my stubbornness became objectively stupid, which, according to him, happened frequently. We developed a routine faster than I wanted to admit. He made breakfast while I complained about his eggs. I took my medication while he pretended not to check whether I'd actually swallowed it. He worked during the day, and I learned how exhausting recovery could be when doing absolutely nothing looked like laziness but somehow felt like labor. There were boundaries. I insisted on handling anything personal that I could manage myself. Ryan accepted that without making it awkward, arranging things within reach when necessary and then leaving me alone. That should have made the arrangement feel clinical. Instead, it started feeling domestic. The strangest part came in the evenings. Once dinner was finished and I had taken the last medication I needed for hours, there was usually nothing left for Ryan to do. Yet he stayed. One night he sat beside me on the couch scrolling through movies. "You know you can go out, right?" I asked. He glanced over. Where? I don't know. Wherever you normally go when you're not babysitting an injured idiot. You're not an idiot. I raised an eyebrow. Fine. You're temporarily an idiot. Ryan. He lowered the remote. Do you want me to leave? The question caught me off guard. That's not what I said. I know. For a moment neither of us spoke. Then he selected the terrible action movie I always watched when I was stressed. I stared at the screen. I didn't tell you I wanted this one. You always want this one when you've had a bad week. You remember that? Ryan gave me a look like the question itself was ridiculous. Ethan, I remember everything. He said it casually, but something in me went unexpectedly still. Later, after the movie ended, Ryan remained beside me. One leg stretched beneath the coffee table, his phone untouched. There was no medication to manage, no food to prepare, no practical reason he couldn't walk down the hall, grab his things, and spend the rest of the night doing whatever he wanted. Instead, he asked if I wanted another movie. I said yes before I could think about why. And for the first time since he had carried those bags through my door, I realized I had stopped wondering when Ryan would go home. I had started waiting for him to come back. By the following week, I could move around the apartment without Ryan hovering within grabbing distance. My knee still hated me, and the cracked ribs made certain movements unpleasant. But I had learned how to carry small things without turning every trip across the room into a negotiation. That should have meant Ryan spent less time there. Instead, I started noticing how often he chose not to. He still worked during the day, but afterward he came straight back to my apartment. Sometimes he cooked. Sometimes we ordered food. Sometimes there was nothing to do except sit at opposite ends of the couch arguing about what to watch. One afternoon, I had a recovery-related appointment and insisted I could manage more of the trip myself. Ryan let me, intervening only when necessary. You're getting better, he said when we were back inside. That sounded almost disappointed. His eyes flicked toward me. I'm devastated, he said. Soon I'll have nobody to complain about. You could go home and complain about me remotely. Something changed in his face. It disappeared so quickly I might have imagined it. Yeah, he said. Soon. I told myself I was reading too much into one word. That evening, Ryan made dinner even though I was perfectly capable of assembling something myself. Afterward, I carried my own plate to the sink. He watched me put it down. See, I said. Functional adult. A historic day. Keep talking. Your services will be terminated early. He smiled, but again there was that tiny hesitation. I started paying attention after that. Ryan had opportunities to leave constantly. He could have gone back to his apartment after dinner. He could have met other people. He could have reclaimed the evenings he had rearranged around me since the accident. Instead, he stayed. And once I noticed it, I couldn't stop noticing. One night, I found him in the kitchen making tea after I had already taken my medication. You know I don't need anything, right? He looked over his shoulder. Congratulations. I mean tonight. There's nothing you need to do. I know. So why are you making 2 cups? Ryan looked down at them as though the answer were obvious. Because you'll steal mine if I only make one. He handed me the mug prepared exactly the way I liked it. I took it, suddenly unable to think of a smart response. The problem wasn't that Ryan knew me well. 11 years of friendship explained that. The problem was everything that explanation no longer covered. He wasn't simply helping because I couldn't manage alone. More and more I could. He was still here anyway. And the closer I got to recovering the life I'd had before the crash, the more uncomfortable one question became. If Ryan didn't have to stay anymore, why did he keep choosing to? The question followed me for the next few days, mostly because Ryan kept giving me reasons to ask it. My knee was improving, but certain movements still reminded me that improvement wasn't the same as recovery. One evening, I tried reaching something I had convinced myself was within easy range. It wasn't. Pain shot through my ribs as I twisted, and I froze. Ethan, I'm fine. Ryan appeared beside me almost immediately. You make that face every time you're definitely not fine. I moved wrong. Stop moving. He stepped closer and helped me straighten without putting pressure on my injured side. There was nothing unusual about that anymore. He had helped me through worse since the accident. Except this time, when I was steady again, neither of us moved away. Ryan's hand remained lightly against my arm. I became aware of how close he was, of the concentration in his face as he watched me for another sign of pain. "You can let go," I said. His eyes met mine. "I know." But his hand stayed there another second. Then he pulled it away. The absence of contact felt more noticeable than the contact itself. Ryan turned toward the kitchen. "Sit down before you decide to prove something else." Normally, I would have argued. Instead, I followed him to the couch. For a while, neither of us said anything. Then I asked, "Were you scared?" Ryan looked over. "Just now. When you heard about the crash." His expression changed completely. I had expected a joke or some version of obviously. Instead, he stared at his hands. "I couldn't get anyone to tell me how bad it was at first." "I know." "No, you don't." His voice was quiet. He looked at me then. "For almost an hour, all I knew was that you'd been in a serious accident and somebody was taking you to the hospital." The room suddenly felt smaller. Ryan swallowed. "I kept thinking I might lose you before I even got there." Something about the way he said lose landed differently. Not because best friends couldn't be terrified of losing each other. Of course they could. But Ryan looked as if he had reached the edge of something he had spent years refusing to say. "What were you thinking?" I asked. He held my gaze. For one suspended second, I thought he was actually going to answer. Then he leaned back. "That you're an idiot who drives too much." I stared at him. Ryan tried to smile. It didn't work. And suddenly I understood something more unsettling than any answer he could have given me. He had retreated. Ryan, who could argue with me about anything, had deliberately stepped away from that question. I looked toward the hallway, where his things still occupied my spare room. Before the crash, Ryan had been my best friend. After it, he had become the person who knew my medication schedule, made 2 cups of tea without asking, stayed when he could leave, and looked genuinely unhappy whenever I talked about not needing him anymore. Maybe none of that had started here. Maybe being trapped together in this apartment hadn't created whatever was happening between us. Maybe it had only removed enough distance for me to finally see it. After that conversation, pretending I hadn't noticed anything became impossible. For 2 days, Ryan and I continued our routine as if nothing had changed. He worked. I recovered. We ate dinner together. We argued about movies. But now every ordinary moment seemed to contain another one underneath it. On the second night, we were sitting on the couch when I finally turned toward him. "Why are you still here?" Ryan glanced at me. "We've covered this." "No. We've covered why you moved in." His expression tightened slightly. "I'm asking why you're still here. You're still recovering. I can make food. I can handle my medication. I can get around without you following me everywhere." "I don't follow you everywhere. You practically developed a tracking system. That was because you kept doing stupid things." I almost smiled. Almost. "Ryan." He stopped joking. "There are entire evenings now when I don't need your help once," I said. "You know that." "Yes." "You could go home." "Yes." "But you don't." He looked away. That was answer enough to make my pulse quicken. "Why, Ethan?" "What?" His jaw tightened. "Maybe don't do this right now." "Do what?" "Ask a question. Ask one when you've already decided what answer you want." I stared at him. "And what answer is that?" Ryan looked at me again, and the distance between us suddenly felt much smaller than it was. "I don't know," he said. It was the least convincing thing I had ever heard him say. I shifted closer before I could reconsider it. Ryan noticed. His eyes dropped briefly to my mouth, then returned to mine. That tiny movement erased every explanation I had been using since he carried his bags through my door. "Tell me to stop," I said. His breathing changed. He didn't move toward me. He didn't move away either. "Are you sure?" he asked. I nodded. Only then did Ryan close the remaining distance. The kiss was brief, careful. Nothing about it could be mistaken for an accident. When we separated, neither of us spoke for several seconds. My heart was pounding harder than it had any right to. Ryan stood abruptly. Ryan. No, the word frightened me until he immediately softened it. Not no to that. He rubbed a hand over his face. Then what? He looked at me with an expression I couldn't read. You're recovering from a car crash. I moved in because you needed help. You've spent weeks depending on me for things you normally do yourself. So I'm not going to take that and turn it into something you might understand differently when you're completely yourself again. The words hit harder than I expected. You think I kissed you because I'm grateful? I think you almost died, Ethan. I think everything in your life got knocked sideways overnight. And I think you deserve to know what you want when you don't need me standing beside you. I wanted to argue. The problem was that the boundary he was drawing made me trust him more, not less. So we pretend that didn't happen? Ryan's eyes met mine. No, something warm and terrifying moved through me. We definitely don't pretend. He sat down again, leaving a deliberate space between us. The friendship we had walked into this apartment with was gone. Neither of us could honestly return to it. But Ryan had given me an answer only to replace it with a worse question. I knew now that whatever existed between us wasn't only friendship. What I didn't know was whether it belonged to us, or to the strange, temporary life the crash had forced us to share. After the kiss, Ryan became more careful. Not distant. That would have been easier. He still made breakfast. Still reminded me about my medication. Still left the good mug beside my place at the kitchen table because he knew I hated the chipped one. But now, whenever his hand brushed mine, he pulled it back first. Whenever I looked at him for too long, he found something else to look at. It should have made things less confusing. Instead, it made everything worse, because I had started seeing the past differently. One morning, Ryan left my coffee beside me without asking how I wanted it. I stared at the cup. What? You remembered? He frowned. Remembered what? The extra sugar. You've taken it that way for years. Have I? Ryan gave me a strange look. Since college. He said it so casually that I almost laughed. Then I remembered something else. A night years ago when I had been sick before an important exam. Ryan had stayed awake in my apartment until morning, claiming he didn't trust me to take medicine correctly. At the time, I had thought it was just Ryan being Ryan. Another memory surfaced. A birthday I had almost spent alone because everyone else canceled. Ryan had abandoned plans he never told me about and showed up with the exact cake I had mentioned wanting weeks earlier. Then another. A job opportunity one once considered across the country. Ryan had asked endless questions about the city, the apartment, the commute. I had assumed he was being supportive. Now I wondered whether I had misunderstood the concern behind those questions. The memories weren't proof of anything. That was what made them dangerous. I couldn't suddenly turn 11 years of friendship into evidence just because we had kissed once. But I also couldn't unsee the pattern. That afternoon, Ryan came home earlier than usual. You okay? He asked. Yeah. He studied me. You're staring. I'm thinking. That's usually dangerous. I smiled despite myself. Then I asked, did you always take care of me like this? His expression changed. Like what? Before the crash. Ryan was quiet for a moment. You've always been terrible at taking care of yourself. That's not an answer. I know. He set his keys down. I'm not trying to make this harder for you. I know. Then let it be what it is for now. For now. The words stayed with me long after he walked into the kitchen. I was recovering faster every day. Soon I wouldn't need him to help me get around. Soon I would be able to drive again. Soon there would be no medical reason for Ryan to sleep in my spare room, make my meals, or organize his life around mine. The strange part was that instead of looking forward to that freedom, I had started dreading what it would mean. Because Ryan had been careful not to take advantage of my dependence. And I was beginning to wonder whether I had been using that dependence to avoid asking the harder question. If Ryan had been choosing me long before the crash, how long had I been choosing him without realizing it? By the end of the next week, The difference between needing Ryan and wanting him had become impossible to ignore. I could get around the apartment without my crutches for short stretches. I could make my own breakfast. I could shower without help. My doctor had told me recovery was progressing well, and for the first time since the crash, I believed I might actually get my old life back. Ryan should have been happy. At least he looked happy when I told him. "That's good," he said, smiling. "You sound surprised." "I'm not. You are a little." He shook his head. "I'm glad." I watched him for a moment. "You'll be able to go home soon." His smile faded. "I know." The words were quiet. I expected relief from both of us. Instead, the apartment suddenly felt different. Ryan had started packing small things without announcing it. A few shirts disappeared from the spare room. His bathroom bag was no longer beside mine. His books, which had gradually taken over one corner of the coffee table, began appearing in a stack near the door. I pretended not to notice. Then one evening I came home from a short walk and found him folding clothes into the same duffel bag he had brought on the first day. "You're leaving." Ryan looked up. "Not tonight." "That wasn't what I asked." He stopped folding. "You're almost back on your feet." "I know. You don't need me living here anymore." The sentence should have sounded practical. Instead, it felt like something closing. I stepped farther into the room. "So that's it." Ryan frowned. "What do you mean?" "You move in because I get hurt. I recover. You move out." That was always the plan. I hated how reasonable he sounded. "What about the kiss?" His expression tightened. "I haven't forgotten." "Then why are you packing?" "Because the kiss matters." That answer made no sense. Ryan sat on the edge of the bed. "Ethan, I meant what I said. I don't want you wondering later whether you kissed me because you needed someone. I don't want you looking back and thinking I stayed because you were vulnerable." "You think I would?" "I think I need to know that you're choosing me when you don't need anything from me." I stared at him. He looked down at the half-packed bag. "I can't make that decision for you." Something in his words unlocked every memory I had been trying not to examine. The late-night calls when I was having a terrible day. The plans he had quietly rearranged. The way he always seemed to know when something was wrong before I said anything. The questions about jobs far away. The birthday cake. The nights he stayed when nobody had asked him to. 11 years of moments I had filed under friendship suddenly looked different. "You've been doing this for years," I whispered. Ryan went still. "Doing what?" "Choosing me." He didn't answer. He didn't need to. The silence was the answer I had been too blind to recognize. Finally, he looked at me. "I have loved you for a long time, Ethan." My breath caught. "Before the crash?" "Yes." The room seemed to lose its shape around us. Ryan swallowed. "I never told you because you were my best friend. And if telling you meant losing you, I couldn't take that risk." I looked at the bag beside him. "So you're still leaving?" He nodded. "Because now you need to decide what you want without me making it easier for you." For the first time since the accident, I understood what being independent really meant. It meant nobody could choose for me anymore, and that meant I had to decide whether I wanted Ryan to leave. "I don't want you to leave." The words came out before I had time to make them safer. Ryan stared at me. I took another step toward him. "I know I can live alone now," I said. "That's the whole point. I can walk. I can make my own food. I can take care of myself. I don't need you here anymore." He said nothing. "And that's exactly why I'm asking you to stay." His expression changed. I could see the doubt immediately. "Ethan, no. Let me finish." I had spent weeks measuring everything against the accident. Every feeling. Every moment. Every time Ryan looked at me differently. I had wondered whether pain, fear, gratitude, and dependence had blurred something that had always been clear before. But standing there with Ryan's packed bag beside him, I finally understood what the choice actually was. I wasn't asking him to stay because I was injured. I wasn't asking him to stay because I was afraid of being alone. I was asking because the thought of returning to the old version of our friendship suddenly felt like losing something I had only just learned to see. "I want you," I said. Ryan looked down. I could almost see him fighting the same instinct that had kept him silent for years. To stay? He asked. To be here, with me, not as my caregiver. His eyes lifted. As what? I swallowed. My boyfriend. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then Ryan let out a breath that sounded almost like a laugh. You have no idea how long I've wanted to hear you say that. I'm starting to understand. He stood. The distance between us disappeared slowly this time, with neither of us pretending it was accidental. Are you sure? He asked. Yes. Completely sure? I nodded. Ryan reached for my hand, giving me plenty of time to pull away. I didn't. His fingers closed around mine. The simple contact felt different from every touch since the crash. There was no medication to administer, no injury to protect, no practical reason for him to be standing there. Just choice. Mine. His. You know? I said. You could have told me years ago. He gave me a crooked smile. You were unbelievably oblivious. I was. Not. You thought me driving 3 hours to help you move apartments was normal. It was normal. You thought I remembered every birthday because I have a good memory. You do. You thought I canceled dates because I hated dating. I stared at him. You canceled dates? Ryan laughed. Forget I said that. No, he stepped closer. I'm not forgetting anything anymore. Neither was I. When he kissed me again, there was no hesitation. No uncertainty about whether the moment belonged to the crash or the recovery or the strange little world we had been trapped inside. I kissed him because I wanted him. Ryan kissed me because he had wanted me long before either of us had been brave enough to say it. When we finally pulled apart, his duffel bag was still sitting on the bed. I looked at it. So, I said, are you unpacking that? Ryan smiled. Only if you're sure. I took his hand again. I'm sure. And for the first time since the accident, I didn't feel like something was being taken away from me. I felt like I was choosing what came next. The first morning Ryan stayed after the crash had a strange kind of normality to it. There was no medication schedule taped to the refrigerator anymore. No crutches leaning against the wall. No careful calculation about whether I could make it from the bedroom to the kitchen without help. I did. I made coffee while Ryan stood beside the counter, watching me with an expression that was becoming increasingly annoying. What? Nothing. You're staring. I'm appreciating your recovery. I think you're checking whether I'm about to fall. I can do both. I rolled my eyes and handed him his coffee. He took it without asking what was in it. Extra sugar. The same way he had always made it. Except now I knew what that memory meant to me. I had spent weeks thinking independence meant getting back to the life I had before the accident. I had treated every task I could do alone as proof that I was finally becoming myself again. But somewhere along the way, I had confused needing someone with choosing them. Those were not the same thing. I didn't need Ryan to carry my bags anymore. I didn't need him to remind me about medication. I didn't need him to stay awake when I was hurting or make sure I got home safely. I could live alone. I simply didn't want to. Ryan had unpacked his duffel bag the night before. His clothes were back in the spare room. His books had returned to the coffee table, and his bathroom things had found their familiar places beside mine. None of it felt temporary anymore. He came over while I was standing at the window. You okay? Yeah. I turned toward him. I was thinking about the first night you moved in. The night you nearly murdered yourself making coffee? That was balance. That was stupidity. I smiled. You told me you were staying until I could manage safely. I remember. You were right. He raised an eyebrow. About what? I did need you then. His expression softened. But I don't need you now. Ryan waited. I reached for his hand. I still want you here. His fingers closed around mine. That's better, he said. Better. Much better. I laughed. The crash had changed almost everything I thought I understood about my life. But the strangest part wasn't that Ryan had moved into my apartment because I couldn't manage alone. It was that when I finally could, I realized I wanted him to stay. The bag he had once packed to move out was still empty in the spare room. And for the first time, neither of us had any reason to pack it again.